Well, I'm going to sort of keep it short, probably even shorter than Samira's. No, the reason is because I'd like to sort of show you some things, and it would be great if we could actually engage in a dialogue, so we could actually have a conversation, so that might be more interesting and engaging, and because there's so much to share that I don't know where to begin and what you're interested in, so I don't want to just sort of talk constantly. Well, I'll begin by explaining why I chose this title, From Life to Page to Stage to Life. Is that the way I see my role as a playwright in particular, not so much as a director, I'll set that aside, is that, as a playwright, you're drawing from life. That's where your inspiration comes. And you're distilling something that you've experienced in life or seen around you, and you're marrying that to your imagination and creating something there. But it's come from life, it's come from the society that the playwright lives in. Now, when the director or the producer takes the play, they further distill it in the sense that they look at this material and further process it till they come with their interpretation or vision or something. And this is again married with what they read, what they get from the play. And it's married to their own experience or imagination or creativity or whatever, and it sparks something in them, and they have some kind of an idea as to what they want to, how they want to explore that on stage. So the next step would be the designers and the actors, who will then further process what the director gives them, and the director shares their vision. They're further processing it, and again there is a constant sort of union of what they're receiving and what they're processing with that material, bringing in their collective and artistic and craftsmanship to this, and creating something further. And the actors then have a similar process. And finally, it comes back to the audience, which again is a society where that material is drawn from. So in that sense, you're drawing from life and you're giving it back to life. So that's why I call this From Life to Page to Stage to Life. And when it comes back to society, it is like holding a mirror to society, as the saying goes. But it has been processed, it has been imagined, and it has been reimagined. So what you're getting is actually a synthesis between the artist and the society, who is actually the primary inspiration behind it. So what you're seeing is a reflection of yourself, but in a way it's so focused on one aspect of your existence that you are compelled to receive it and give it some thought. It's not something that doesn't belong to you at all. It has always been there with you, but the way you receive it, it actually it opens up a space. It's almost as if all these lives live within us in a very dense and concentrated form. And this experience with the art then sort of focuses on one side of it and expands it so that it's like seeing it under a microscope. And so you are actually discovering a whole new world which exists actually within you. So it is this process which I think is the strength of theatre, is because it relies on the imagination and the collective experience of the audience to complete the process. Whereas if you look at other I would add dance, I would add the performing arts, not just theatre. I would say music does that. I think dance does that. But if you look at cinema, or whether you look at television, maybe they're wonderful art mediums, but they work in a slightly different way. Yes, they do give you the experience of the human condition, and yes, you do connect with it. But it relies heavily on entering you through sensory perceptions. It's a very sensory medium. Theatre is too, but the way theatre engages imagination, I'm not so sure whether watching a movie engages it in the same way, maybe in a different way. I'm not so sure. But I think that's why a film is called the director's medium. Because it's a director who's actually processed it to its completion, and you have in front of you a product which will stay that way forever and ever. It may fade a little in the film, of course now with the digital even that doesn't happen, but it's something it's a product, whereas theatre is always a process. Because it continues to change and it continues to adapt from moment to moment, from audience to audience as well. Like if you ask any actor, they will tell you that in a performance, if they receive something from an audience, it changes how the performance is played out. And one of the jokes I remember is that in one of my plays, it's a black comedy. And you can play up the comedy, and one of the actors said that when they perform, within 2 minutes they know whether the audience finds it funny or not. And if they do, then they play it up to that. I'm appalled at the idea, but actually they're right. I mean, they're completely sort of in the spirit of theatre, adapting from moment to moment. And I think that's the wonderful thing of adapting, because we're all adapters in that sense. We are adapting. Adapting would mean making something suitable for a particular purpose or a particular time. And here, I'm adapting my speech, looking at the kind of energy I get from you, and with making eye contact. I might clarify something, I might repeat something, I might skip something, depending on what I feel at this moment is of value to us, value for me to share, and value for you to receive and process as well. So having said that, and having said that theatre is in its heart an art of adaptation, I must say that the last two projects that I worked on, one as a playwright and one as a director, were completely new experiences to me. Because the first one, I'll give you a little bit of background on that, is that Vikram Sampath, who is a very well-known biographer, and he's written the biography of the Wadia families, and then this famous Thomri singer Gohar Jan, my name is Gohar Jan. And when his book was published, he asked me to inaugurate, what's it called, release the book. And I said yes. And immediately when I read the book, the first copy, I was privileged to be amongst a few to read it first when it came out, even before it was launched. I thought that this is screaming to be made into a film. That was the first thing I thought. And later on, when I shared this with Lilette, and I said, it's worth considering as a dramatization, and she agreed completely. And she fell in love with the book as well, and said, why don't you dramatize this? And in all my enthusiasm, I said yes. Except, I've never adapted from a book before. So here I was, a complete novice, having written plays for 35 years, and suddenly at this sort of fix as to how does one adapt from a book, adapt to a biography. So the first challenge and the first sort of trepidation was about adapting from another form, a literary form. That too, a biography, not even a novel, which means there are facts that have to be adhered to, and there are facts that you could play with, but in essence, it's not really something that comes completely from your, your imagination, or your idea, or your perception of what there are events which one has to be faithful to, and one has to draw completely not from life but from somebody who's already collated something about. And then the third challenge was period. It's a time. It's early 1900s, 100 years from now. So not only did I have to adapt it to a different form, theatre, and a biodrama, which I'd never written before in my life. But the challenge was, why am I telling this story to people in the 21st century, 100 years later? What does it mean to us? So these were questions that initially plagued me. When earlier I thought, oh God, it's such a well-written book, and it's all there in the book, and it'll be a cakewalk to just adapt this. And I found that at every step I had to make choices. And some of those choices were not good. Added to that, the daunting thought that no matter what you do, people will always say the book was better. So there was this, and I could understand why, how filmmakers feel when because people who've read the book have married that book with their imagination, and they have already created the drama in their mind's eye. And what you're doing is you're challenging that in many ways by what you present to them. So are people willing to sort of open out? And I was hoping and praying not too many people in the audience have read the book, so that I don't get the book was better. But it's surprising how famous the book has become. So there were quite a few. So obviously I had the responses like, why did you leave that out? Oh, but you should have had that incident in the play and whatnot. And so obviously this is something that came with the territory, and I have to sort of accept that with grace and say that yes, you will get this response. But having said that, I must say it was a tremendous creative experience for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. And I think it's also the fact that Vikram had managed to create this very vivid image of Govardhan, and she just sort of came alive in my mind's eye. So in that sense, it was it was inspiring to do it. Now, the other thing about adaptation is that, especially from a biography, it's not a novel, it's a biography, is that yes, you have events that actually happen, you have real life events. You can speculate on what happened when there was no way of documenting, where there were no witnesses. For example, what happened between her and her mother, in private. Nobody knows that because it's not documented. Is that how do you arrive at a dramatic energy? Because drama, whether it's film or stage, I would still use the word drama for both, is that it's a temporal medium. So in that sense, what's happening this moment is connected to what's happening the next moment, and so on and so forth. So you're sort of structuring the Template music, I think, or dance, that's the way it is, because one thing is developing into another. So there is this kind of development which happens. There's a beautiful term in ballet for that. It's called, I think it is called developing. It's when the body sort of expands, when it sort of stretches out, and that's the way a good story sort of develops in that sense. So, for me to get to the emotional core of Gauhar was quite a task, and I attempted at trying that. Now, just to give you an example of what the process of my adaptation was, I'll read out a passage from the book, and I'll read out my dramatization of that passage. So I thought that might be interesting. And then I'll talk about my second project. So, if you haven't read this, my name is Gauhar Chand. It's a beautiful biography. It doesn't even, it's not just dry facts. He has a writing style of his own which is very compelling. Just to give you one, how many of you know who Gauhar Chand was? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, quite a few don't. Well, so don't mind my assumption that a little bit of who she was. She was what one critic called India's first mass media superstar. That's who she was, because in her time, especially when the gramophone records came out, she was a household name. Right? Her picture came on matchbox covers, just to give you an idea of how popular she was. So we're talking about, well, I don't know, who's the latest range? Deepika Padukone plus 100. That's who Gauhar was. And this was a time when you didn't have digital images and you didn't have, but still people talked about her. And one of the reasons is, of course, her singing charms. But at that time, singers, only a few gentrified men, not even women, had access to the songs, because these were women considered to be of ill repute. So people, from middle class respectable homes, never went to their salons. It was always the sort of decadent, gentrified male category of people who patronize and go to these soirees. And the songs were, of course, full of, love and eroticism. And so there was this, sense of entertaining with sexual innuendo and whatnot. It must have been a very colorful period. Now, at this time when she was at the top of her career, the gramophone and typewriter company came to India. It's very interesting that it was actually the typewriters that they relied on for profits, so they could support the gramophone company. So that's why it was a gramophone and typewriter company. And one of the tasks that was given to this particular recordist, American, was to record Indian music so that they could sell the gramophone machine to wealthy Indians. At that time it was priced at 750 rupees. So 100 years ago that was a small fortune. So they were there to make business. And the only way they could do that is if they had a sufficient library of records to sell the machine, sell with the machine. So they were looking for singers of stature. But their challenge was that the vinyl could only record 3 minutes. Whereas suddenly they discovered that in classical music, 3 minutes is like clearing your throat to begin singing. Because then, the exposition itself is about 20 minutes. And then the development is another 20. So you're looking at an hour of music. And so they had the naive idea that they could condense it in 3 minutes. And sure enough, all the musicians of stature said, this is impossible. This is a travesty of our music to sort of reduce it to 3 minutes. Gauhar took on the challenge, and she restructured the tonri to fit into the 3, and she created a perfect structure, using a certain, he explains it better than I do because he is a musicologist, how she created that structure, brought it down to 3 minutes, and took on the opportunity and rose to fame and acquired her fortune. Because at that time, she quoted her price. They were offering something like 50 rupees to 100, I'm not quite sure, but in that range, to the singers, and they recorded a few singers earlier. Technically, she's not first. And she wanted 3,000, and they agreed. So her very first recording, she got 3,000, and she went on to record more than 250 songs for the gramophone company. So 100 years ago, you can imagine what kind of wealth she amassed, right? So I'll just read this. In my play, I've divided it into, the first one is memory, so it's the older Gauhar sort of reflecting on her glory. And the second act is actually through the point of view of the recordist, Frederick Gaisberg, who was American, but he spent a lot of time in Europe because he worked with Berliner, who was actually the inventor of the gramophone as it was manufactured. As opposed to, was it Edison? And Edison sort of had a different structure to it which didn't work. But then Emil Berliner, a German scientist, actually recorded that. And so he was, I would imagine, this is my speculation, he was quite besotted by Gauhar because she was very attractive and beautiful. And he does sort of, in his accounts, he does it. I've used this in my play verbatim. This is his Gaisberg's own words about Gauhar. Every time she came to record, she amazed us by appearing in a new gown, each one more elaborate than the last. She never wore the same jewels twice. Strikingly effective were her delicate black gauze draperies, embroidered with real gold lace, arranged so as to present a tempting view of a bare neck and a naked navel. Now, here is Vikram's account of what happened in the recording. Gaisberg was convinced that Gauhar would become the country's first gramophone celebrity and a mainstay for the consolidation of the company's fortunes in India. He knew that she was hugely talented and tried to get as much variety in her recordings as he could. One day he played the record of the Jewel Song from Faust, sung by Suzanne Adams. Gauhar and her attendants were astonished by the rapidity of those bravura scales and trills. The high-pitched song was sung almost in one breath. Gaisberg jokingly asked Gauhar, "Can you sing something like that?" She remained silent and did not answer his question even as she left for the day. When she came in the following morning, she told Gaisberg that she had accepted his challenge and would try something new. She sang a piece in Rag Sur Malhar. Gaisberg was electrified. He simply could not believe what he was hearing. It was a similar breathless song, sung in increasing tempo with single breaths, packing more and more notes with each progression, in a raga that symbolized the monsoons and the accompanying thunder and lightning. The lyrics, of course, meant nothing to Gaisberg, but it's a song about the thunder and the rains coming down. The recording team stood speechless when she finished and then broke into rapturous applause. The recording experience, as was mentioned earlier, was a musician's worst nightmare. The singer had to crane his or her neck into that narrow horn fixed on the wall and literally scream as loud as possible. The volume of the voice would ensure that the needle rotated and cut the groove on the disc. One wonders how much musical value is lost in this process, especially the subtle nuances that are so characteristic of Indian classical music. Since many Indian musicians had a habit of shaking their heads and gesticulating while singing, a recording agent would literally hold the head of the singer still or stretch the poor musician's head further into the horn and make him bellow while two others held his hands. What a journey the music recording industry has made since those days. As you can see, he has a lovely tongue-in-cheek way of writing, but of course I couldn't really dramatize that, but I did attempt something. So here's the scene which was inspired from what I had read out. This is Gaisberg's studio, and she's actually singing a Bengali tapa. It's a light-hearted sort of, with a very nice sort of rounded rhythmic pattern to it. So the tapa continues to play as the scene begins. We're already hearing the recording. We see Gauhar now with her head stuck in a huge horn fitted on the wall, presumably singing loudly. Gaisberg is in the recording room at the other end of the wall. The song in the record ends with, "My name is Gauhar Jan. This is a Bengali song. You like the song." Gauhar steps back, recovering her breath and laughing. Clearly she had fun. Gauhar: "I don't think that song has ever been sung at that pace." Gaisberg enters. Gauhar to Gaisberg: "Was that all right? Did I get the timing right? Within 3 minutes?" Gaisberg: "Just about." Gauhar: "Don't pretend. It was 2 minutes and 21 seconds. Gaisberg: "My God, how on earth can you tell?" Gauhar taps her foot to show how she marks time, like a metronome. Gaisberg: "And why did you say all that at the end? This is a Bengali song. You like the song. Only your name is enough for the manufacturers in England to get your name right on the label." Gauhar: "Well, now they know it is a Bengali song." Gaisberg: "And that they liked it." Gauhar laughing: "That was meant to be a question." Gaisberg: "It sounded more of a command." Gauhar laughing: "I don't know what I was thinking when I said that. It doesn't matter. It'll be fun for people to hear it on your machine. So, what next, Mr. Gaisberg? And perhaps we may want to renew the terms of our contract." Gaisberg winds up the phonogram and plays Suzanne Adams singing the Jewel song from Faust. Gaisberg: "Do listen to this. It is sung in one breath. And do take note of the rapidity of the premier scales." As the song plays, Gaisberg turns and narrates. He becomes the narrator. "I knew she was looking at a higher fee for future recordings. I had to keep a hold on myself. I was prone to agree to any of her demands just to have her present in my studio. She was always bien sonnée. Every time she came to the studio, she amazed us by appearing in a new gown, each one more elaborate than the last. Strikingly effective were her delicate black gauze draperies embroidered with gold lace arranged so as to present a tempting view of a bare leg or a naked navel." Gaisberg turns back and stops the playing of the Jewel song, and he speaks to her half-mocking, "Perhaps you could sing something like this in Hindustani. I can bring this over to your place so you may practice." Gauhar: "There's no need. Mr. Gaisberg, looks like it might rain." Gaisberg: I believe it was quite pleasant this morning in this talk with an early Gauhar: "I wasn't talking about the weather politely like the English do. I believe it will rain now, right here in your studio." And then Gauhar sings a piece in Rag Sur Malhar. It matches the Jewel song in its trills and breathless notes. After she sings, silence. Gaisberg is stunned after a while. Yes. Shall we discuss your contract now? Go ahead, after a while. Mr. Gaisberg, why do you think I agreed to record more songs for you? You think it is the money? I was ready to turn you down when I heard my voice for the first time on the disc. It is something that you said that made me reconsider. You said I could enter homes that have no place for me. Well, I am interested in entering some homes. Handing him an address on a piece of paper, or just handing him a piece of paper. I will appreciate it if you could deliver a machine to this person, and also periodically send him discs of my songs when they come out. You may deduct the expenses from my fees. Gaisberg, looking at the paper. But there's only a name, there is no address. Go ahead. Find it. Gaisberg, who is he? And off stage, we go back into memory. We hear her father calling out, Angelina, Angelina. Gohar was actually born as Angelina Yobert. She didn't have Indian blood in her. She was the daughter of an Armenian Christian. And, well, she did have Indian blood. Her mother was Anglo-Indian. So, the emotional core that I felt worked for me was her sense of abandonment, because her father left them, her mother and her, when she was 6 years old, because he suspected her mother of infidelity. And so they had no social support. She was sullied. And so because she was a musician, she changed her religion. From Christian she became Muslim, and she learned Arabic, and she learned Persian, and she learned Hindustani, and trained Gohar to sing in Hindustani, moved to Banaras and trained her to become a great singer. So that's really her story. So in my play, I felt that could be the emotional core, her need for validation from a father who had rejected her. And that's what it plays out in all her relationships with her men. Because it's so surprising in the biography, you can see that here's this intelligent, talented, beautiful, rich, famous woman who has it all. And she has, the Bengali elite dancing around her little finger. But every relationship she had, she was exploited. She became so vulnerable in her relationships with the men she chose to have a relationship with. And so many, unlike the concept we have of the wives, that they entered into a relationship purely for financial reasons. That's not entirely true. They did have their flings and affairs with rich landlords, because that was a source of income. We can judge them for that or not, that's a different thing. But a lot of them invested themselves emotionally in relationships that actually made them spend money on that relationship, not the other way around. So ultimately she lost all her wealth because the man, her old secretary whom she fell in love with, cheated her of her property and everything, and so she died a miserable death in Mysore, where the Maharaja of Mysore sort of took pity on her, and this was when she was well past her prime, and she wasn't as famous anymore. And she died in a government hospital, and she owed the hospital 15 rupees or something. And the Maharaja had to settle her bills. So it's quite a classic story of fame and downfall. So that was just to give you an idea of how my process of adaptation was. So this is one sort of something that I wrote this, I dramatized this last year. So this was, after about having written 14 plays. So it was a completely new and different experience, and I'm very proud I did it because I learned a lot in doing that. And I think the the biggest compliment I got was when I sent my draft to Vikram, and he said I was moved to tears, and I really think you've done it, because I was so nervous about what he would think I've done with his material. So that was that. Now, by a strange coincidence, around the same time, I got an offer from Barnard College of Columbia University in New York City, asking whether I would come and direct Chokhe Bali, Tagore's dramatization of Tagore's novel of the same name. Now, why I call this a peculiar work of fate is that Chokhe Bali was written at the same time, 1901, 1902, and around the same time, Gohar recorded her first song, 1902. So I could just imagine Tagore, very gentrified and very prim, and the kind of his family would never go to Gohar Jal's. At least not something they would acknowledge. They might have done it in private. I don't know. But here he was, this genius, writing Chokhe Bali. And at the same time, Gohar, just at Chipur Road, which is just a few miles away from Joroshanpur, she was entertaining, and all these men were dancing around her little finger, because she had the talent, she had the looks, she had everything that in a hedonistic society matters. Youth, beauty, talent, and having this very overtly what would have been considered a scandalous lifestyle. And Tagore, in his imagination, was creating spaces for women who had no space at all. The novel is about widows, and the widow's right to love. The heroine is widowed, and then she falls in love with her best friend's husband. And that's what the story is about, that, doesn't she have the right to love? So you have this extremely gentrified character who was fighting for a space. And here was this other woman, Gohar, who had the space. She created her space. And of course she was an outcast in her own way. Both Binodini, that's the heroine of Chokhe Bali, and Gohar were outcasts, especially when Binodini, her love for this man is found out as the novel progresses, that she has no space then in society. So, and she has to make choices, and she makes some very brave choices over there as well. Whereas Gohar, in spite of all her power and intelligence, makes some very foolish choices. So that was very ironic that I got that. Now, the challenge with that was quite different. One thing is that the dramatization was already done by Professor Partho Chatterjee. And a wonderful one, because he tells the story through the eyes of the servants in this Bhadralok kind of Tagore's setting. There's no men, there's just a peripheral sort of reference to the servants in the household. Whereas in the dramatization, the entire story is told through the point of view of the servants. So that was very exciting. But my challenge now was to present it to a multicultural, multiracial audience with a multicultural, multiracial cast, because this was for the students at Barnard College, the drama students there. And yes, there were some students of Indian background. As I soon discovered it, that didn't make a difference, because when it came to wearing the sari, the Indian student had just as much difficulty as the non-Indian student. So it was very interesting. So that was the challenge. And Anish, that nice young man there, was the dramaturg, the assistant dramaturg on that. So I'll ask you to share your experience of how you saw the adaptation work for you or not work for you. So that was a huge challenge, and how could I sort of, in a way, essentialize Tagore's characters, at the same time give them a here and now space that would then transcend all these cultural languages, which even if I were to do Chokhe Bali today, for today's audiences here in India, it would be quite a task, because widow remarriage things we think is no longer an issue, but of course it still is, because it's to do with the position of women. You know, you never see a widow with the same eyes that you would a widower, you know, and that has more to do with the sort of skewed sort of gender equity or inequity that we have. So again, I didn't want to get into accents and body language. So one of the things I did, of course, from day one, I made them wear saris and dhotis. Because more than imitating, I wanted them to live in those fabrics, because the way they move, the way they breathe, changed with the fabric. You know, anyone who's worn a sari would say that it alters. For example, May, who plays Ashalata, now she is of Irish descent, and she wears jeans, you know, so she has a very angular way of walking, you know, like any young person anywhere, even here, right? So when she wore the sari, I said, look, you know, think about the hip as taking the, like, it's a hip which displaces, and not the, you know, the entire sort of body from one. So that was something that was interesting to her. And Supriya, who was born in Delhi, took even longer than me to move in that sari. So all those cultural assumptions we have about skin color were destroyed immediately. You know, you cannot assume that just because she is of Indian origin that she knew more than you know, the others. So that was just one off example, but I think the best example would be to actually show you a clip from the beginning, and then you know, I'll throw it open to questions. 4 questions. Now this is, the play happened on actually the beginning of this month, 3rd, 4th and 5th were the shows at Barnard College. And another thing about as you can see, is that I sort of brought the story, I framed the story through Columbia University students. So it begins with seeing a university student on stage on the set home with his laptop and stuff.
Sorry.
The other adaptation I've used is also the use of film projection. I had a wonderful designer, video designer, Anna Hansen, as you will see in the next scene. Because again, I have to give them the import of what it is for a widow, what it is for a woman to lose her husband, and how does it change her in terms of color, in terms of space, everything. And that I Well, I could take questions on this, or I could ask Anish to talk about his experience. Because Anish was sitting in rehearsals, making his notes, and it was very interesting some of the research that he came up with. Because in the play, there's this washerwoman who is silent; she never speaks, and I wanted to give her a little more space. And I used her sort of washing for sound effects to create a sound texture. And at appropriate moments, the anger and repression which the protagonist faces, it gets physicalized in the way the woman's washing the clothes. Then he came up with some interesting research on the washerwoman. Right? Would you like to share that?
So actually I was going to bring that up in the question and answer session itself.
Let's start the question, so let's have your question.
So to go off the title of your talk itself, you said from life to page to stage to life, and then you talk about both Gohar Chan and about Vinodini and Chokhe Bali, and about how these are stories that have been stigmatized, and these are stories that are now being told through theatre. But interestingly, you haven't mentioned this, and I think you should have, because the fact that you inserted the washerwoman into the narrative of Chokhe Bali, a character that doesn't exist either in Partha's adaptation of the novel into the play or in Tagore's original novel itself, was a conscious choice, and I was wondering how you made that. Because in the process of dramaturgy, when you first got your instruction that there is a washerwoman, everyone was confused because how do you provide background research on a washerwoman in 19th century Bengal? But when it came about to actually doing research, it was very easy because the washerwoman, ironically, is the one character that hasn't changed at all. And to me, it was fascinating that you inserted someone like the washerwoman to tell stories that are still not told. And so I think if anyone was watching Chokhe Bali in New York, the one takeaway would definitely be, and this is the responses I got throughout, the next play should be on the washerwoman. So I was wondering, what made you choose the washerwoman? And then the conversations we had on how that choice was...
Exactly, yeah. Well, because actually I took the hint from Partha's adaptation. Because in that he's telling the story through the eyes of the servants. But one interesting thing is that the servants are talking about the masters. They're still telling the master's stories. So it's still a story about the Badralu, the gentrified people in the story. What I wanted was to give it another layer and to say exactly that here's an untold story. So you do see this washerwoman working in isolation. And she's mute, she never speaks, and you know immediately that there's another story, and she's a widow herself. So again, you're looking at position of women through classes. So as a working class woman, what does it mean to not have a man, the protector in her life? And someone who has a profession, she's a washerwoman. So in that sense, it's not just economic dependence, it's a social dependence, because society expects you to be dependent on a man. So for me, it was about an untold story, and for a more practical reason, because the gentrified people are sort of confined with their clothing and their spaces. There was no way I could physicalize without getting melodramatic. And I thought the washerwoman would be the ideal choice in the sense because of the physical activity of washing the clothes, and also it could provide texture to the sound as well, the water and the squishing and the slapping of the clothes on the stone. And so in that sense, yes, that was an adaptation of the adaptation as well. So there's always a sort of adapting it for its needs. And also I just felt that something which is so verbose needed that physical activity for us to understand on a visceral level what the protagonist is going through.
It's super interesting that you did not have any any conception of what the washerwoman meant, because when we started doing research on the washerwoman, it turns out that the washerwoman, especially in Bengal, happened to be a cultural trope that is found since the 14th century in the Manchamangal, which is the book of snakes. And the washerwoman is endowed with divine supernatural qualities in that Manchamangal, which I think Mahesh managed to physicalize beautifully in the
Which
play.
I had no idea of this background of the washerwoman. So again, that's an adaptation of that as a dramaturge. He further adapted the washerwoman and gave it this mystical interpretation. Yeah, Samir.
So then while you're talking, I was just wondering, because you talked about the earlier adaptation, the reading of the vision of God. When you write a play, what do you see and hear it as well when you're writing, or
Yeah, for me it's important to see it because I think theatre works just as imagery is created through words in the book, in the novel. I think it's created through actions on stage, like the washerwoman. So for me it's very important to see what are they doing because that's when you can actually give it some dimension. So that's really what.
Because what fascinates me actually more of the same, which I'm sort of the same, is you seem to be hearing it as well. Because both the washerwoman and even the way it's written as well have page.
Yeah. I think because it is an audio-visual medium in the sense, I think those are the ways you can when I say physicalize it, that the two senses the audiences receive it is through their vision and through their ears.
The other question, sorry, this is one question. The other question that fascinates me when you read the two bits from God is you also the liberty to take your time. So can you talk a little bit about that as a playwright? Because the way in the novel things were so sequential.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, okay, I don't know because people haven't seen the play, so it might be a little, but I'll briefly touch upon that. In the play, the first half goes backwards in time. So you see 1902 and then you see 1901, then it takes you to the court of Vajidali Shah, and then you come to her as a child, and the act ends with us understanding, yes, she was abandoned by her father. We discover her roots there. So the only reason why I wanted to tell the story backwards is that we are sort of going deeper into her personal life from her profession, rather than, I thought that would be far more interesting to arrive at that core than to sort of tell it in a linear fashion that yes, she was born in Hazamgarh and then she got famous and then she recorded, which is interesting by itself. But I felt this was important.
It was very effective. I saw the play.
Oh, good. I'm glad because we had several doubts.
Very effective.
Oh, good. I'm very happy to hear that because at rehearsals, there were questions being asked. Will it be confusing? Are you just simply confusing?
It was very interesting. The initial part when I was doing it, it was not confusing, but I felt that now this is getting a little too much. But by the time the play was ending, the whole context became much more clear in that sense.
Oh, good. Yeah, good. I'm happy to hear that.
Coming back to the washerwoman.
Yes. The washerwoman is clearly the star.
Just to get the feel right here. So how often the washerwoman comes in the play? 3 times, 5 times. And secondly, besides anger, frustration, what were the other emotions you captured with the drama?
Well, again, the way the set was designed is that all these private moments between characters, there are people on the periphery watching. Because that's another thing which I wanted to convey was that spaces are rarely private in our society. There's always somebody watching or listening. And she does, in one moment when Ashalata tells Vinodini that this is your home, consider this your home or something to that effect. And you see the washerwoman looking around and it's just, she's as displaced as Vinodini. So there are, I don't know how many times I bring her in, but there's this entire, because even Tagore's story, he tends to share, his characters tend to share stories. So there's this scene where Binodini is reading from Bankim Chandra Chatterjee to Ashalata. It's about this girl who drowns because her father married her off to somebody else. Then the fish come and save her and make her a queen. Now on stage I had a washwoman get into the water, into her trough, and actually drowning. And to further sort of underline that, I had an image of that being projected on the screen as well. So, and then there's one place where the first time, Binodini and Ashalata meet, and Asha says, "Shall I call you sister?" And Binodini says, "No, that's too boring. Let's think of a name." And she says, "Well, let's call each other Chokhe Bali, which means sand in my eyes, an irritant, And she says, that would be an interesting, because if a sand goes in your eye, it itches, tears roll down. That would be an interesting relationship, don't you think?" And then I show the washwoman slapping the clothes. So I just used it for punctuation as well. So I wasn't quite sure whether I was going a little over the top with the washwoman, but I think it was reasonably balanced. So yeah, yes.
Is it something like a cue the playwright is giving to the audience that this is the change of emotion, this is to highlight some certain kind of emotionality? That is how, did you use washwoman like that?
I think yes, I did. To the point of it's you have to do that with great care, because you don't want your presence to be felt, because the audience is not going to accept that, right? But you're right. I mean that the intent was very much similar to what you said. Is more than to guide them towards a particular emotion. I was keen to create a pathway that would then give them access to and then how they read the emotion, of course, added more to sort of underline that or prescribe that. Yes?
I'm a fan of all your plays. You write on such a variety of topics. How do you do your research? Because some is about homosexuality, some is about child molestation, some is about, the wife exceeding a husband. How do you do your research? And it's fantastic in all aspects.
Yeah, well, I think to me, the best part about playwriting is the research. That's something, because that to me is where I feel that I've learned something about my world and learned something about myself as well. So for me, I do spend a great deal of time researching, and I think most writers do that. But it's nothing compared. Vikram spent 4 years researching for Gavarjan. I spent about 6 months, researching on whatever the subject of my play is. But I think it's very important to do that research. Yes. Yes.
I'd like to know how to decide what to keep in the play and what to do not keep in the play.
Well, there is an artistic discrimination there. You can never be right or wrong. You can only be subjective. Ultimately, there is a craft. There are these sort of guidelines and principles, but ultimately it's subjective, like painting or sculpture. So I do make choices. Now, obviously, even with this adapting, I couldn't keep everything that's in the book, because that would be like a 6-hour saga. I had to sort of condense things, so I have to make choices. In fact, there's one whole relationship of God with a very famous Gujarati director, Amrit Keshav Naik, which I didn't touch upon at all. And sure enough, there were theatre, veterans who said, "Arey, how can you leave that out? I mean, that was such an important relationship."
Referred to it.
I referred to it, yes, exactly. There's just that one line where, because she moved to Bombay and left her mother and stuff like that. I just felt it was going off, where I wanted to keep the story going. So one has to keep a tight rein on that. Otherwise, you do tend to get indulgent, and yes, you want to sort of include everything in. It would be nice, but one has to sort of make those choices. Yes, sir.
What has been your inspiration for all these years you've been going in this theatre? So what has kept you going?
I think it's the stories. I think it is like, people tell me that, do you use theatre for your political voice? And I say, no, it's the other way around. Because I write, I've discovered the politics of what I write about. So for me, it's what keeps me going. It's like what keeps a traveler going. Why does a person travel to many places? Why does somebody go to Mount Everest or whatever? There's a certain discovery, which takes place. For me, I think I discover a lot of life through.
So your passion is playwriting, not necessarily direction.
Well, I do direct, yes, but then I get called only because I'm a playwright. Nobody calls me because I'm a director. I do feel very defensive about my directing capabilities. I think I'm a good director, but lots of people disagree with me.
That's very modest.
Yes.
How do you research? What are your methods of research?
My methods of?
Research.
Well, nowadays it's very easy because the first thing you do is Google. So that's the first thing, but it's not the nice thing to remain at that. If possible, it's nice to interview people. That's what I did with my earlier plays. Final Solutions was before the days of internet. So I actually spent almost 2 years interviewing people, and then even 30 Days in September, which is a play about childhood sexual abuse, I had the chance to interview 8 survivors of sexual abuse, and the play is actually a collation of many parts of their stories. So yeah, there are different ways, but I think the ideal way is person to person, because that's what the play ultimately becomes. It is interpersonal and intrapersonal, and so it shouldn't scream of facts and figures and things. Those are important just to give you an idea of where those characters are placed, but the facts and figures by themselves don't really do anything to create any dramatic energy. Yes?
So when you said that when you first read the book of Mahesh, your first perspective was to adapt it into a film. So from a filmmaker's point of view and perspective, how would you have gone about it? Where would have you started the research, and what would have required to get the film done, and how to go about it?
I think I would have done a great deal more research, which I did, but maybe more in depth with the music of that time, because that would have been the highlight of the film, as would have been the period. So, filming is about graphic details, and so the more you research into that, so it would have been a very interesting process. But the production houses I approached, they didn't even want to know who God. They said woman-oriented. Well, who do you have in mind for that? So, and I did not want that for him.
So I think from your perspective, the biggest challenge would be going back to the period and getting that done.
One of the challenges, I think the biggest challenge to me would be how to steer away from the Tawaif stereotype, because you've already had Umrao Jam, right, which was a huge success and very successful because it did create the period and the setting and the color and the music and everything so well, and it did have its emotional impact as well. So I think the biggest challenge would be, what am I providing which saves it from becoming just another Tawaif story? Yeah.
In Govarjan, I have not yet read the book, which I will, but just the scene about the father coming to the court.
Yes.
Is that factual?
It's factual. It actually happened. Is that the servant, for people who don't know the thing, she was in danger of losing her property because one of her servants' sons claimed to be the son of her mother, and that she was a bastard child, and the law said that if you were not a legitimate child, you did not inherit your parents' property. So she had to seek out her father and get him to come to court. And it's factual that he asked her for money as well to come to court.
That's the part which I was
He did do that. Yes, the lady.
How did you select this music for that play?
Vikram is a musicologist, so he's provided a whole musicography, and I just chose music that was appropriate for that scene. Like the Sur Malhar one, I thought would be just appropriate because again it's a song which has a lot of taan in it and improvisation, and it just fitted in. So depending on the mood, I've chosen that.
I've seen the play and it is very well done.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah. Well, again, I think having singers like Zila Khan and Rajeshwari help because they really make a difference. That's true. Yes.
How do you decide the names of the characters? Because with names come restrictions, class or caste. So how do you decide?
Well, are you in reference to Gauhar or in general?
In general.
Well, I have to admit that I don't really think of caste, but I really should because that makes a difference. But the surnames, yes, because most of my characters or families in my earlier plays came from a certain Vaishnav business trading class community. The surnames match. And for example, in 30 Days in September, I've used Khatri as a surname. So they're clearly, Kshatriyas of a particular community of Punjabis as well. So yes, that plays an important part in it. Of course, earlier I used to be slightly romantic, and I don't do that anymore. Like for example, Tara. I call her Tara because Tara is in stars, and her brother's called Chandan and whatnot. So, and now I have to say no, I'm not going to do that.
Train dance like a man. What was the inspiration?
Well, that was my guru story and a little bit of my own because I studied Bharatanatyam when I was in my early 20s for 6 years. Other very famous popular gurus who went through independence, they came from respectable Brahmin families. And at that time, this was when the stigma was still attached to Bharatanatyam as a Devdasi's dance form. So, first of all, for a woman to learn dance from a so-called respectable family, it was a stigma. For a man to learn dance was a double stigma. So that was, even today, if you look at male dancers, there's always this snide kind of thing that, that's an effeminate form. Whereas actually dancing requires an athlete's regimen. You have to be as strong as an athlete to be able to dance. So that was the inspiration.
So what is your next?
I'm still recovering from Chokebari. Sorry?
Do we get to see?
Well, I doubt it unless we do another production here, which I would be most interested to do, because this was specifically done for Barnard College and their drama students. But I think it's, I would like to, although I think, I don't know, it might happen, yes.
One can't see the washerwoman now.
Sorry?
One can't see the washerwoman now.
Oh, well, in this clip, no, it's not. I mean, you'll have to sort of forward. But she was an amazing actor. Actually, I got a dancer from the dance class, a student from dance class to play the washerwoman. And she was just amazing. Because although she's very still, I did want a certain choreography to her movements. And she managed to do that very well. Well, so...
Fine. There are more questions. Do you want to try and forward with this? Because people are interested.
The washerwoman?
Yeah.
Okay. It'll take a while. Do you guys mind if I...
Do you know where it is in the play? I'll do it while you talk.
Yes. It's sort of, if you look about 15 minutes into the play.
Sure.
By the way, historical research will show the famous story of the washerman and in Jahangir's story.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you can even go back to mythology. I mean, Rama, the washerman plays such an important part in, in the climax of the story as well. well. But what was interesting is that, no, it's not, no, it will be a good half an hour. Yeah, okay, yes. Yeah, it's a yes now. There she is.
I'll just take it. Take it back.
Yeah, but she's going to come now, so you can play. This is their first meeting.
A few days later, the old mistress came back. With her came the new.
That's a water trough there, you can see it. That's when they first meet.
Why don't you call me Santa Nana? Sand in my eye? What's that? A grain of sand stuck in your eye? Did you choose the eye was red? Tears fall down your cheeks? That would be a very interesting relationship. Don't you think?
There's more of the washing women's winter. While that song is playing, you see Binodini handing the clothes to the washwoman. So there's a certain bonding between the two widows of a different class structure. So that was pretty much it. So
we also have pictures up on the production blog of the washerwoman.
So do you want to share the blog address?
Yeah, so it's very simple. It's Dramaturgy and Tagore. www.wordpress.com.
That doesn't sound simple to me.
I will give it to you.
Yeah, give it to Sweta.
Yeah.
Okay, I will give it to you.
So maybe you can, so because they're all on your list,
Yes,
so you could just forward it to them. Yes.
Considering that 3 minutes was costing 3,000, we don't have a ticket of that.
Of Gohar. Yeah, well, there is you on YouTube you can get the actual recording. Well, we could find it. Yeah. If you put Gohar first recording.
But you should see the play live if you have it. If you have it, it's the live singing is unbelievably good.
It's the yeah.
Yes, it's a live play right now. It's running right now.
Yeah.
And if you keep your eye open for it, there are 2 plays prime time. And the play is called My Name is Gohar and the yes, that's the play. And I mean, it's such a fascinating story, but the singing is something else out there.
In 1901 or something.
Yeah, 1901. That's That date is wrong. It's 1902. Remember, she had to scream into that hall with her head stuck
Were you looking for, do you want to see from the play, is that what you were asking as well?
Not original photos.
This is original.
This actually, one of the unfortunate things is that we don't have recordings like when the microphone came out. By then she, lost her, peak. In fact, in the play, in the last scene, she says that, where was the microphone when I was singing? Because they had to sing in this tune, and sheer vocal energy would then move the groove, which was recording the sound. That's why it's of such. So, obviously she could sing much, much better than that, because if you're screaming, you lose out on all the nuances and the microtones and things. But going by the documentation, she was a brilliant singer of her time.
Are you going to write any films? Because that's why you moved to Bombay, said earlier.
Actually I moved to Bombay to make professional theatre. I couldn't do professional theatre in Bangalore. I did direct a few films, but I feel that the structure is such that actually now of course it's changing, but it's too dependent on that name that would sell. And whenever there were certain projects that I approached certain stars and things, but then they would want some changes, and they would want, and it's not with the idea of making the story better. That's a change which I would gladly listen to, but it's more about what their public image is, and they would want to go with that and stuff. So ultimately, what happens with film directors, and I think that's true even today, is that you just become a stage manager for whatever the star wants and what the producer wants. So I don't see myself in that position, but I'm very happy to know that things are changing, that there are now, there is a focus on content, on story and good direction. I think times are changing for the better. Oh, okay, sorry.
Since you are adapting to somebody else's book into play, there's always a challenge because when two people are involved, there are two different meetings, and you have to condense the story into certain time frame.
Exactly.
And when there are different people involved, each brings in something to the table. Now, while doing this entire process, what was the most challenging part? And what was the best moment for you?
Yeah.
Where you felt that, yes, I'm not sold at the story, yet I got some contributed to it in some beautiful way. So which was the best and the most?
The most challenging was, what do I leave out? That was, I wanted to, in fact, it was very interesting. One would imagine that it would be the other way, that Vikram would insist, no, you must keep that, and you have, he was the one who was saying, no, if you don't want it, leave it, and I would say, no, but what about that, we need to keep that and whatnot. So I guess for me personally, the most challenging thing was, how do I tell the story the way it needs to be told as a dramatic piece, and not just as a faithful adaptation of biography, but at the same time make sure that I can include what I need to be included. But that's not possible. You have to make choices, otherwise it just and plus you're using music, so as you can see, the songs take up so much space, and rightfully so, because it's a play about the singer, and so much of her persona comes through her singing, so that becomes a part of the narrative as well. So that was a challenge, to keep the space for the music, at the same time have the dramatic content moving, and to keep it all within 2 hours. That was definitely the challenge.
Both mediums will have different grammar, so
yeah, that's right. And even the singing, the choice of the songs must offer dramatic development. It can't be seen as an interlude, as in some musical forms would have that as a kind of diversion or whatever. But I was very clear that the song should also move the story forward through emotional development. Great. So, yeah, I think we're done.
Thank you so much, Mahesh.
My
That's
pleasure.
really lovely. Thank you.